Hi, it's Mrs. Stone with Advancing Science at Gettysburg College, and today I'm going to explain to you how to measure the bird skulls from our collection. When you get to the skull, the first thing you want to do is just take a look at it and identify some of the major parts. For example, the eye socket is right here on the side, the nostril right here in the beak. The beak is divided into two parts. We have the upper mandible and the lower mandible. And then if you look on the bottom side, you'll see a hole right here where the bird's spine would connect to its skull. On your data sheet, you'll notice that the skulls are numbered, and there's also a number tag on each of the skulls. I'm looking at skull number 4, so I'll find that spot on my data table. The first thing I need to do is describe the beak. I can describe the shape of the beak, the size of the beak, whether or not there are any hooks on the beak, if there's anything that looks like teeth-like structures. Then, based upon those observations and my prior knowledge, I want to make some predictions about what I think this bird may eat. So would it eat insects or seeds, worms, fish, small mammals? Make your prediction here. Then our next column is to take our skull measurements. There are 4 different measurements we'll make: skull length, beak height, and beak width. We'll use a tool called calipers to make those measurements. Calipers are basically a sliding ruler, and these can be used to measure objects that have an unusual shape to them. You'll notice that there are 2 sets of markings. The markings on the top are in inches and the markings on the bottom are in centimeters. Since we are working in science class, we will be measuring in centimeters. You'll notice that the pinchers slide open and shut. And so in order to make our first measurement, which is skull length, we want to open our calipers up wide so that we can measure from the back of the skull to the tip of the beak. So you'll notice how I lined up either end of the pinchers on my calipers with the back of the skull and the tip of the beak. And then I will just read right here on this bottom ruler. So that looks like it is 9 centimeters in skull length. My next measurement is beak length. For the beak length, I want to measure from the end of the nostril to the tip of the beak. So I'm going to put the calipers into the nostril right there. Slide them down so they match up with the tip of the beak, and then I can read on my calipers there. It looks like 3 2/10 of a centimeter for my beak length. For beak height, that's going to be this measurement right here, the height of the beak, including both the upper and lower mandible. Now I want to measure that where it is the thickest, which is going to be closest to the skull. So again, I just pinch my calipers around and then I read to this point right here to make my measurement and record that on my paper. And lastly, measure beak width. And I want to measure that at the widest point up close to the skull here. Now, if you forget how to make your measurements as you are working, you do have a guide that looks just like this that will help you remember where to place your calipers to do those measurements. Once you finish measuring all of the different bird beaks, then you can work with your teacher and your classmates to figure out what kind of bird was represented by each skull, and then also figure out if your predictions were correct about what that bird likes to eat. Now it's your turn to go ahead and measure those skulls. Be sure you are careful with the skulls so that none of the parts break off.